What is going on, guys? Welcome to the Wednesday night live stream. Today we have the one and only Robert on today. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well, Devin. Thanks for having me back, buddy. How are you?
Good, thank you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I know.
Crazy. 2022, man.
Yep. A whole year just went by like crazy.
Yeah. You're telling me. The last 2 years have been a whirlwind. Yeah, it's been crazy.
Merry New Year to you too, Greg.
Greg Carroll?
Yep, good old Greg Carroll. Yep, so Happy New Year, Reefers. I guess this is technically the first stream of the new year. So yeah, Happy New Year's.
Indeed it is. I'm glad I texted you. I texted, last weekend, I think?
I know. That's good. Perfect.
Yeah,
I like it. On it. New Year's resolution. Robert, be on schedule for streams.
there you go. Yeah, that's a good one. That's a real good one.
Exactly. So today, in spirit of good old New Year's resolutions, we figured we would dig into Reefer Resolutions. And at least for me, one of the big ones is kind of breaking all those bad habits of complacency, which you fall into over time.
For sure, man. There's quite a few of those that I think a lot of us are guilty of. And it's like once or twice doesn't matter, but they stack up over time and they can work against you. And then once you finally cut it off or break the habit out, you really see the difference, you know?
Yep. So Reefer confession number one, what I just did recently, the issue that I dealt with. On my tank, my salinity went way down, way lower than it should be. And this
I had a fun battle with that 2 weeks ago.
Yep.
You first.
My theory is it was probably a mixture. The auto water change was a little bit off, and it could have been adding too much calc, and it could be a couple things. But anyways, historically, the Apex salinity probe, conductivity probe's always been a bit flaky, so I've never fully paid attention to it. And of course, I saw it was a little off. I was like, it's just a probe. And
have you seen
Christmas
there's a tip for that. Have you seen it from
VCA?
Yeah, VCA, exactly. Creative Aquatic. It's kind of neat. You have to run a line to it though, right? You pump water through it.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
You basically force water through it. It prevents all the micro bubbles.
Yeah, the bubbles. Yeah, it's red. That was interesting. It was cool, but the fact you got to run a line to it kind of a bummer. But at the same time, you get constant salinity that should be accurate, right?
True. So, I mean, if you have a manifold or you have something anyways, it's probably super easy to do. If you don't, then you need to pump for it, and there's a little more thinking involved there. Yeah. But yeah, I might actually have to get that now after what I just went through. So, salinity went way down to, I think my probe set was like 27, 28, so way lower than I'd like.
Oof. Yep. PPT, right?
Yeah.
28 PPT. Yeah.
PPT. So, I should have paid more attention to it, especially when it got so low, but it's Christmas time, family, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't. And then eventually when I looked and realized it, I tested with my Hannah. It was low. I'm like, so I pulled the Tropic Marin little bobber one, still low. I'm like, shit. So I'm like, okay, I know it's legitly low this time. So of course I started raising it. So at first I raised it fairly quickly to get it closer to 30. And then after that, the last 3 or 4 PBT, I raised it slowly by just doing, a pitcher or two of salt water, dumped it in, and replaced the ATO.
Right. Yeah.
And all was all great for about 2 weeks. And then just the last few days, I had 2 acros that started STNing. I'm like, F. So that was likely fallout from the salinity swing. So realistically, I should have just moved my ATO pump to the saltwater bin and let it slowly correct it over time. That would have been the smarter move in retrospect. Which, of course, so Reefer resolution for me. Actually, if I see something off, actually double check it, verify it, and don't just ignore it. That's my first one.
And I think with salinity, mine's a salinity story too, that over the holiday and the lack of, a result of neglect. But I think good advice with this is, don't forget your salinity, man. It's so easy to forget salinity sometimes because it's such a constant and it's so easy for us to maintain it and it becomes just like typical. But I mean, I do it. I've done it a few times where I kind of fall off the wagon of testing it constantly. And I only bring out the refractometer, the salinity pen when I'm mixing water. And it's like, you got to do it. So yeah, this time around, it was like 2 months. I hadn't done a water change. I'm like, I really need to do it. So I mix up the 20 gallons and I go to measure the 20 gallons. And I've got my sort of like, okay, I think it's like 12 cups of the Tropic Marin Classic into my 20 gallon barrel. That's where I usually start, and then I'll adjust usually 1 or 2 more cups after that. At any rate, I put my initial dose in, or the initial amount of salt, I let it mix for probably 7-8 hours. I come back later that night. I go to test it, and it tests a little low, so all's fine. I'm like, okay, that's typical. Well, I'm not going to do the change tonight, so I'm going to let it mix overnight. I'll adjust tomorrow. So I go back to it, and I pull out the pen again. I go to measure the bucket of water, and it tests like low, like super low, like essentially 1 point lower than it did the previous day.
Yeah.
Which that should have been my trigger when it was different from the day before. But I was just like, okay, whatever. So I go and adjust it, and I add salt. Well, then I go to measure my tank with the Hannah pen.
Also 1 point off?
No, it was like 5 or 6 points low.
Oof.
Just like, yeah. So I was like, I wasn't quite in the high 20s, but it was like, yeah, I guess 29 was in the tank, and the salt bucket was like 27.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just like, wait, I know my tank's not 29. So I calibrate my Hannah, and push comes to shove. I overshot my salt mixing barrel up to like 40.
Oh, no.
My tank was low, but only by like 2 points. Like it wasn't just your typical sort of, neglecting water change variation.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was just a bummer. And I had, I didn't have new water. I couldn't, like, in most situations, I would dump that because this is a 40 PPT, and tropic marin's already a high concentration of calcium.
Well, just add more RODI.
Yeah, but when you add too much salt, it can precipitate out. And at 40, I was like, that's a lot. I just figured that was a lot of points over.
I just add more RODI.
Well, see, it what made me think of the precipitation was it clouded a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's typical to cloud when you add salt. But, like, the cloud wouldn't go away. Like, and I let it mix for 2 hours. I'm like, okay, don't worry about it. It's going to be okay. I didn't have time to mix new water. Oh, and I had already drained my tank, by the way.
Yeah.
But that was a mistake, was make sure your water's ready before you drain your tank. So that's why I'm freaking out.
Mm-hmm.
So I fixed it. I added fresh water, got it to 35, filled the tank. Everything was fine. But, I was certainly, my heart sank when I had drained my tank of 25 gallons of water and then had a barrel of like 41, 42 PPT salt water that I thought had precipitated.
Yeah.
And I went to test the pH just to see if it tanked at all, but pH was good at like 8.25 or something like that. And then I switched it out with the tank, and everything was good to go.
Mm-hmm.
But I neglected to monitor salinity, didn't double check that salt barrel, and I drained my tank before I had that salt perfect.
Oh, no.
So it was like, nothing bad happened, thank goodness. But like, lesson learned, man. Like, you calibrate that damn salinity probe, and they tell you, like, I've told 100 people, like, calibrate it, at least once a month, every 2 weeks. They tell you to do it before every time you use it. You can kind of get away with that because you test quite often, and when it starts to stray.
Yep.
But I'm gonna just make sure I calibrate, and I have like 20 calibration packets. Like, there's no reason I should not have checked that thing before I did it. Just pure laziness. So
True.
Whatever lesson you can pull out of there, but I think the biggest thing for me was having pulled the water out of my tank and then being scared I didn't have water to put back in it.
Yeah.
I siphoned it right out in the backyard, like into the gravel driveway out back.
Yeah, that's a tricky one, actually. So feeding into that, one of the questions in the chat, how often do you calibrate your Hannah salinity pen? I'd say every month or so I do mine.
So when I'm doing, do as I say, not as I do sometimes, I try to do it at every month. But it happens naturally twice a month because I do my water changes at least twice a month.
Yep.
And I'll try to calibrate it before I do that. I'm sticking it in my tank and measuring it probably once a week. Yep. So I can, I really have a good eye on like how that monitor is reading, because, the tank stays fairly stable. Water level stays stable. Okay, I know salinity stays stable. So yep. I can kind of see it stray. So I'm just trying to think of a reason where I've gone 2 and 3 months without calibrating and stayed perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So I think if you do it on a monthly regimen, you'll be safe.
I think so too. It's a good amount.
And I think instructions from Hannah are you calibrate it before every use. Like, I think that's. And that's how a classic analog refractometer, you should zero it, if not calibrate it before every use for sure.
If you're a high roller on the salinity packets, then. I think monthly is probably good enough, though, for realistically most people, like every 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, for sure.
Yep. So I think I'm gonna go for the weekly to spot check, just as like good practice.
Well, and that's the thing is, I hadn't checked my tank in probably 3 or 4 weeks. Like, holiday came through. I knew I needed to do a water change at the beginning of December.
I haven't checked mine in months.
Yeah, and it wasn't until the end of December, 1st of January. I mean, it was the Christmas weekend. We got a couple nice long weekends there with those 2 holidays, so it was that Christmas weekend that I was doing it. Yeah.
On that note, one good thing is during all this, I found, because I had a salinity pen, I lost it for like ages, so I eventually bought a new one. And I finally found the other one. It was like down the side between my mixing bin and the wall. So now I'm up to 2 again, so I can calibrate them at the same time and leave one at the mixing station, one by the tanks, and I'll actually do it more.
That's nice. I don't have one of the Tropic Marin ones. I really want one of those floating ones. Because those are nice for salt mixing barrels, man. Those are nice to.
They're always calibrated.
At a glance. Right? Yeah, they're always calibrated, and if you have any kind of flow in the tank, it's kind of annoying. But I have a couple graduated cylinders and beakers, and so I can easily just keep that thing in there, fill it with water, and always have that constant level, and not even have to worry about the calibration of the pen. And the pens are nice though, man. Hands down, far better than an analog refractometer. I do calibration's easy, and I don't mind going through all that over questioning an analog one. Mm-hmm. The analog ones, man, sometimes they could throw you for a freaking loop.
I mean, you bump it and it's off, right? Like
that's
it's really easy
to
throw in calibration.
And then you have the whole, if you try to zero it with RODI water or something, and then you're like, crap, am I 2 points down? Am I 2 points high? Mm-hmm. So you confuse yourself. Then you don't trust it. And like I have gone in circles, calibrating and zeroing that thing, because I just didn't trust that it was measuring right. 9 times out of 10, you're within an acceptable range as long as you're using the right 35 ppt solution. But yeah, I mean, you calibrate with 35 ppt and then you go zero it, and it'll throw you off, man.
Nope, so true. All right, man. So, aside from salinity, what else have you realized are stuff that could do better or improve or?
Okay, so keeping the tank I have now, it's in my house. It's a 40-gallon tank. I live somewhat rural. I mean, I live in a small town, outside of Nashville, like 30 minutes. So, I mean, I have access to fish stores and pet stores, but they're a good 20, 30-minute drive. In addition to, I've worked at a saltwater aquarium store, essentially, or online store. I've had access to anything and everything I could ever want for my saltwater tank within a day, or, for 20 years. I mean, gosh, I've been doing it. I started working at Marine Depot in 2000.
Way back when?
Way back when. I was 21 years old, however old that was.
Yep.
I was born in 85. So yeah, 2006. At any rate, so now I'm here. I work from home and don't have the store. So I've really come to learn and cherish the things like backup heater, making sure I have a backup pump, making sure I always have salt and 2-part on hand. And I've been burned, man. I think I ran out of food in the middle of last year at one point. I'm not even thinking about it, because usually, I've got a handful of sample foods on hand, or some foods that, I don't typically feed. So I always have something on backup. But for whatever reason, I feed TDO Chroma Boost as sort of my everyday pellet, they get every day. And I got to the bottom of that bag and I was ripping apart my cabinet. Dude, I had no food. Man, I gotta prepare for this.
I know. I ran out of frozen over Christmas. I've been feeding my buddy's tank, so I stole a handful off him to tie me over, and ended up just going to buy some the other day. But
so I think the advice here is like, don't neglect. Yeah, have extra. Don't neglect to see the unforeseen, or just plan for the future. Plan ahead. Right now, winter is finally hitting us. Like, we're finally getting cold weather and snow, and man, having that backup heater is something that always terrifies me, because it's a heater. Never been in trouble with a heater, outside of one shorting and causing a fire.
So
that was one in the office, though. It wasn't one in my house.
No. Okay, so speaking of heaters, if you live in a colder climate too, making sure your heaters can keep it up. So I'm looking after my buddy's tank, who's been gone for a couple of weeks, and he thought it would be a good idea to turn the temperature down in his house to save some power and everything else. Little didn't consider the fact that his aquarium heaters couldn't keep up. So I'm
They
overfeeding
couldn't
the
keep up
tank.
at all.
Well, it was way colder than it should have been. I don't remember what it was, but I feel like it was like in the 60s, the 70s. I put my hat in the
above
tank.
or below 70?
No, I think it's normally like saying 778, and I think it was like 62 or something. I
Ooh,
went to go
that's
feed
cold.
his fish. I'm like, why the hell is this so cold? Like,
Dude, below 70 is no good.
yeah, it was cold.
But all except anything above 70 in most cases.
Yeah, so I turned his heat back up in the house and everything else. But realistically, so, you know, on his, because heaters work based on the differential, right? It doesn't really matter. They rate him per gallons, but really at the end of the day is how much work does that have to do to heat it above ambient temperature. So
yeah, it's just like a chiller. So it's cooling and heating power. It's like how, you know, it's how much it can heat the particular body of water as opposed to, tank size.
exactly. So, I mean, like, that's one thing for his, right? He should have bigger heaters, probably, because they can't fully keep up. Or, you know, if he's going away, maybe adds an extra one in or something. But yeah, it's another consideration of the funny things. And last time I was over, same thing, because he has the Inkbird on his, and the alarm was going off. And I know after like 24 hours or 48 hours, if it hasn't turned off, aka hasn't reached temperature, then it'll set off the alarm. So it's like this little different things.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think if you live somewhere cold, man, go get a bigger heater, or at least very minimum have a backup. You know, but I think that's one of the questions when people ask for heater. I give them the 3 to 5 watts per gallon. If you're in a cold climate, get something closer to 5 watts per gallon. If you're in the South or in California, you know, 3 watts per gallon will be just fine. Always use 2 if you can. If you can afford it, use 2 of them. You know.
Yeah, 100%.
And if not, afford it with sockets, you know, and afford it with control. Like that's usually the limiting part is just having a plug for the second one. Or at least it has been for me.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so Aaron, so folks are using dual heaters as primary/backup, or are they using 2 simultaneously? I always run 2 simultaneously, but I run kind of in the middle. So if you needed, say, a 400 watt heater, use 250 watts. That way, if one dies, the other one can still keep your tank in a reasonable temperature. And if one got stuck on for some reason, then it doesn't have enough power to cook your tank. So I always do, like, basically take what you think you need, cut it in half, and go a little bit higher. And that's what I do. And I also like to run them on some kind of a controller. Like, I have the BRS one on one tank, and I have the Inkbird on the other tank. And on top of that, they're also on an aquarium controller. So there's, like, tons of levels of redundancy there.
Yeah, at least the 2 temp controllers is nice where you have your backup. But there's also that dual heater where you set the one a little bit lower, a little bit higher. Whatever way, you set a couple degrees lower so that way it only kicks on when it has to. So you have like your primary heater that heats the tank most of the time, and it only in the instance that one is broken and your tank drops 4 degrees, that second one will kick on and keep you up within range. And that second one can be like, say you're using a 200 as your primary. Well, if that second one's 100 watt, you're like Devin said, if they both get on or both on at some point, you're not into a zone where you're going to totally cook the tank at 300 watts of heating power, but you still have that 100 watt to keep you within a reasonable range until you can correct it. And that's the way I like to go too, because that second one doesn't get used. So you should be able to, that heater should last a couple years and be your backup reliably, or your primary one is switching constantly. That switch will go out that switch is going to go out first before the element in most instances. So the one that's not being used as the primary will always be a reliable heater, and you can switch it to a primary, or you have that second heater, no matter what happens.
No, very true.
And it can be a lower wattage. It doesn't have to be equal. Like you said, you use equal wattage, which is fine, but just sort of depending on where you're at with the wattage.
Yep, exactly. Okay, Reef the Sea Forever. Stuff I need to buy this year. Backup return pump, another backup heater, 3 more fish, more corals, another G5, Nero 3. Okay, so backup gear. That is something that is wise to have, especially if you don't have an LFS local and easy to get to. Like I won a Vectra in a contest a while back, and at one point I was going to like sell it or get rid of it. I'm like, nope, going to keep it as a backup. So now I just have it just sitting there just because one day if the one in my water box ever dies or has an issue, I can swap it out and the tank won't miss a beat. So, I mean, it's kind of an expensive backup, but it's nice to have.
Extra pumps in general, man, is just always have extra pumps. You got your mixing pump, you got a water transfer pump, you've got like obviously your main return pump. Having a backup power head can be super critical at sometimes. So I always have a couple utility pumps. I've got a nice mixing and water transfer pump. and then I try to have a backup return pump. And I'll typically have like your main DC pump, which runs in the tank all the time. But my backup will be something like a CJ Silent or even a Mag Drive or like a, what was that other? Rio, like a inexpensive AC pump.
Yep.
Because it just has to last you until you can get the other one back up on and online,
No.
And so it's just much more affordable to go that route, where your second pump is not something as nice and expensive as your primary DC pump. Yeah, your DC pump.
Now, the consideration, if you can get the same pump, it makes swapping it super easy because it's the same fittings, the same size, same threads. So that's one nice consideration, especially if someone else is looking after your tank and how to swap it. It's like super easy. Now, a backup heater is a good idea. That was one of the ones in the chat. That is something I don't have but should have. One thing I ended up getting last year was an extra EB832 power bar because I had one die on me in the past, and I had to send that away.
I've been there, man. That's not a fun thing. It's only been once. Apex has been pretty good to me, but I had one die, and it actually wasn't the 832. I think it was during an update, sort of corrupted the head unit, and it was all fine. I got it fixed, but I mean, it was running 2 tanks, man, and I was terrified I was going to lose everything.
Yeah.
It was right at the beginning of Fusion, too. Like right Aqua Controller to, the latest Apex, the Wi-Fi Apex, like that whole switch. Man, I was terrified I was going to lose everything.
Dang.
But it was great. It worked out. I got on the phone with Neptune, and they helped me fix it.
Yeah, that's good. So, because I'm in Canada, it always takes a little bit longer. They're actually surprisingly quick, but they ended up giving me a deal on it because of the issue with it, whatever. So I ended up buying the other one just as a spare, just to have it.
Yeah.
Now, I have like an old, the 8 before the 32.
Yeah,
the
metal box.
in my tank. And I keep debating upgrading it, but I'm like, nope, going to keep the other one as a spare.
Yeah.
One day.
Have you used the just like the cheap Wi-Fi strips yet? That you program like just for anything on the tank, like the programmable ones. Not like a Wi-Fi power bar. You can get it on Amazon for whatever, $30-$40. Have you used it yet?
My buddy has that basically running his whole tank.
Really?
Yeah.
So I've used the single socket. Yeah. There was I don't know if it was. I don't remember the brand, but for a little while they were selling just a single, Wi-Fi plug, just like the ones that Amazon sells now. But man, I used it to run a light, and after 6 or 7 months, like I don't know if it lost connection with my Wi-Fi or whatever it was, but eventually stopped taking a program. Like I'd have to log into it, program it, it'd work for a couple of days, and then I felt like anytime it would lose connection with my Wi-Fi, it fell off. So I'm kind of scared to do it again. Because I have one in my kitchen that runs little under cabinet LEDs, and it does the same thing, man. It like
I had them all over the
for a while, and then just stops.
Yeah, well,
do you have to reprogram them or what?
No, I have literally plugged into my camera for the live stream, lighting, patio lights. Yeah. I use them all over the place.
I know some people swear by them, man. It's just my experience so far has been less than not reliable enough for the fish tank, that's for sure.
Try a different brand. I'll look up whatever ones I've had and I'll send to you later, because so far they've been solid. And
and that's the thing is, I'm sure the technology's come a long way since that first time I tried it. So.
Yeah. Someone else had to cast a Wi-Fi strip, decided to stop taking network connections, led to a near emergency. So yeah, it is definitely a risk, but I find a lot of these devices, obviously the device can fail, but I find if you have really old Wi-Fi, I know most consumer Hydros Wi-Fi bear strips are great. Yeah, so if you have
the Hydros.
Yeah, if you have a really old school Wi-Fi router, and sometimes I find they get flaky after a while, and that can cause issues with your wireless devices. So if your router is like 5 or 6 years old, it might be worth upgrading it, because that could be contributing. I mean, you can't say 100%, right? But I know since I upgraded mine, all my stuff has been way more solid since I upgraded my Wi-Fi to like newer stuff.
Good point. I've got a new router and whatnot. I think I'm certainly happy with that. It runs my whole house just from the single router, so that's kind of nice.
Oh, exactly. Caster runs my QT system. Yeah, there you go. Yeah, my buddy's house.
I want to go back to Hydro. So when you go ahead,
go for it.
We'll go back to Hydro. Well. So do you have one?
Yes, I have one.
Yeah, okay, you do have one. Yeah, and you set it up and programmed it and everything. So far, so good.
Yep. There was a few weird little issues in the beginning, but that was fixed fairly quickly through.
How do you feel about the whole fallback state? Because that was my only weird thing was, so you lose connection, which with Wi-Fi, it's going to happen.
Yep.
And there's no sort of fallback setting for it.
Yeah, I believe the wired one now does. So if you get the wired power bar, they have one now.
Okay.
Now, because if it's running on Wi-Fi, as long as they can still, your local Wi-Fi, like the internet could be down and it'll still work because it can still talk to itself over your local Wi-Fi. But if your local Wi-Fi is down, then it obviously can't communicate, right?
Yeah.
So that
was the initial argument with some of these Wi-Fi strips. Was like,
but if your local Wi-Fi is down, your power is probably out, and they probably won't work anyway. So.
Yeah, well, that's the argument too. Yeah. Like, if your modem's not working or your router's not working, like your power's 9 times out of 10 is not there either.
No,
so,
I also have my networking. And I have my networking stuff plugged into a UPS, so even if the power is out, it still works for a couple hours. So I haven't had any issues with that personally. Cool. Yep. Nighthawk with Cat 6. Yeah, I looked at the Nighthawk ones. Those look pretty hardcore. Those things look like fighter jets with a bazillion antennas on them.
We're talking about routers.
Oh no, that's the one with the big Star Wars looking one. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, if you do a ton of Wi-Fi stuff and your router's super old, upgrading it will probably give you less issues. Living on the edge, no spare pump. Yep. Could have a spare pump.
There you go. Living on the edge.
Yeah.
I've had to save multiple tanks too from lack of spare pump at said tank's house, Like they call me, Robert, I don't have a pump, man. It's off. It's like 10 o'clock at night. Like, okay, I gotta go to the shed. I'll find a pump. I'll be over,
One thing I did the last few months, I'd say, or longer, but battery backups for power heads and bull tanks. If you don't have that, I mean, a heater controller, prevent heater from cooking your tank. I know another guy, same thing. He was changed on his Apex, plugged his heater in, and it got way too hot and cooked it, and he lost a ton of corals. So that sucks. So heater controller for sure, and having some form of battery backup for power heads you have to fill in the tank. Those are the two. If you don't have a controller, nothing else. I'd say those are two important considerations.
Sure.
Yep.
What other bad habits we got? No, not this is one. Any hand dosers out there? Nano tank people, I know you're there. I know you do it.
I'm hand ATOing my temporary tank beside me. That's a lot of work.
Yeah, that's just a lot of work. That's pretty easy to. I don't know. I think it's definitely a worse habit to either not measure at all or just think that you can hand dose a tank and have it remain stable enough to. I mean, you can keep your coral alive, but there will be a time in the day where you mess that up and either overshoot it or forget for a couple days. So I think that is like, just get a dosing pump, man. I mean, dosing pumps are affordable now and easy to use. You can app control them. I mean, those Komoa Bluetooth ones, man, sort of changed the game with that whole programmable 2-part thing.
Super
$120, right? Yeah,
cheap.
I think they're super cheap. I was gonna say $60 or $70 a piece for the Bluetooth or
the little single ones.
Yeah, the little single ones, man. So you get your 2-channel going. Just dosing pumps are super valuable. And calcium, and like, it's okay to eyeball your trace elements. I mean, I still do it. But your 2-part, man, your everyday 2-part, you got to measure that stuff. It's super important for the stability sake,
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Jake Speed, WXM compatibility for MP40s. You can downgrade the firmware of a Mobius one to the old firmware if you want to use the WXM. I speculate that there will be more compatibility coming back in the future with them being more like sister companies now. It just wouldn't make sense if they didn't do that. So I'm assuming that will happen in the next year or so, but
we'll see, man. We can only hope.
Yeah, I speculate
it would make some great.
It makes sense.
It would make sense, man. Yep. Or dude, we could get Fusion and Mobius to talk to each other.
Exactly.
Game changer.
So I speculate it will happen. I think, like, back in the day, Neptune was really good with playing nice with everybody and being basically like a controller before they started making all their own accessories and everything else. And they started being like more closed up. So I'm really hoping that they go back to just being open, play nice with everybody, control everything. Because I think that will be awesome for everybody. So hopefully.
Other bad habits, man. I'm trying to think of bad habits.
No.
Feeding. You talk about feeding. That's one. I am very guilty of feeding a lot of frozen food. Taking out big chunks and just letting it defrost and just feeding the whole thing.
That's bad. What?
Yeah. That's the thing is, pellet foods are much more nutrient dense though, so you are more likely to get more nutrients in the tank that way. But it's harder to overfeed pellets, in my opinion, even though they are more dense. Like I'm not, I am can be guilty of just squirting a whole ton of frozen food and like filling the tank with.
I put a nice big chunk in there all the time.
Yeah, and like squirting it all over the place and not really worrying too much about it. But pellets, on the other hand, I'm naturally conservative with what I put in the tank, and it's easy to just put a few in, let them eat it all, then put a few more in, then put a few more in, and feed everybody under a minute, and just be confident that most of that food has gotten the fish. But frozen food, on the other hand, man, I am sloppy as all hell with that, because I can get the turkey baster, squirt all the corals, the fish will, come grab that, and then I'll, feed the fish in the corner for a little bit, and then go back and squirt all the corals again.
Now,
yeah,
I have a slightly different outlook because I like frozen because I feel like I'm feeding my corals at the same time. I dump it in by a power head. It broadcast feeds the whole tank, goes everywhere, and then the corals can also get it, especially all those little tiny bits that are, with your mysis and catalysts and everything else.
I mean, that's what I'm saying is the reason, I have the same sentiment. Like, I'm feeding the coral, and that's fine, great, and it does work. But I know you do that every other day or every day for half a year, you're going to get to the point where you need to be mindful of it. Thankfully, we have filter rollers, which are probably saving my tank right now from something like that.
And big buckets of GFO.
I don't touch GFO or carbon. I have carbon, and I'll run it every so often, but like the ROA. I don't run GFO, man. I've got a container of the BRS high capacity stuff, but I just got it to make sure I had it on hand, and I haven't needed it yet. I've been really lucky with that filter roller, man. So it's been kicking ass. And the skimmer too. Yeah. Skimmer's like filling. I'm washing it twice a week.
So last year I had the nitrate battle. Like, my nitrates were like 50 or 60, super high, and now they are super low. Like, now my nitrates are awesome, but now my phosphate's the high one I got to deal with. So that's how the tables have turned compared to last year.
You'll get there. Yeah, it's fun. Every new challenge is an opportunity, right?
Yeah, but yeah, I think last year my nitrates were like 50 or 60 or something like that. I was waiting for it to load and see what they are now, but now they're like less than 10.
I should say though, my tank isn't like super stocked. Like, I've got most of the coral I want in there, with the exception of my clam and an anemone, but I don't have very many fish.
Yeah,
three clowns, the bunny.
That shows up.
And a dotty back.
Yeah. Yeah, that's pretty low.
3 peppermint shrimp. There's probably only 4 or 5 hermit crabs left. Not even that many. There's probably 3 hermit crabs left, and then a handful of snails. So the bio is just not super significant.
Mine's huge, and I feed it with a shovel, so 100%. But
I really want to get a dwarf angel, like a centrifuge.
They're cool.
Yeah, I love them. Just trying to get a hold of one of those captive bred ones. I know the stock comes every now and again, but every time I'm ready to go do it, there's definitely not any stock available, and I know it'll be impossible to find one locally here.
Yep.
So right time, right place, I'll grab one, but I'm holding out for all captive bred. I've been good. Everything's captive bred in the tank at this point, except for the inverts.
Oh, that's pretty good then. You're doing good.
Yeah. All the coral are captive grown. I know that. They all came from other tanks. So
coral's almost the easy one now. We're getting better with fish, though.
Right? Well, gosh, I'm not sure. God, it would be interesting for that number, but like the percentage of, captive cultured versus wild caught, and then like when does a coral go from being captive cultured to wild caught, or vice versa, wild caught to captive cultured?
Is new growth? That's what I mean. Is new growth now in tank?
Yeah, exactly. And is that new growth 100% of the fragment you're getting? Point is like you got a mother colony, right? This floats from the ocean, goes to your local fish store, he chops it up 5 different ways, and you get one of those.
Yep.
And yeah, it might be 2 months old or so, but is that wild caught coral or captive grown? Well, it was a frag off a mother that was wild caught, so it's kind of wild caught. But anything fragged after that second grow out, now that's captive cultured, in my opinion.
Well, that's always one of my mental thoughts about, because I know you can't really bring acros back into Canada from the States. I'm like, what if it's tank raised? It's no longer from the wild. But I'm sure it's like, how do you prove that, right? But
and that's what that CITES is all about and trying to, have some organization to some of that stuff.
Well, that's what I mean, though. If it's not from the wild, if it's grown in a tank, then why should it matter? But...
Yeah, no, and then identification too. I think that's the difficult part with a lot of the regulation is, because I know it even happens with fish and pets and like, just having the sheer knowledge to identify everything properly. Like, when you're working for Fish and Game, or some other regulatory agency that watches these things, like, can you really expect someone to identify every species of coral like maybe you and I can? Or
we can't even do it all.
That's what I'm saying. Like, and then on top of that, every exotic bird, lizard, and everything else, so I think that's a grind, but I think they'll get there. I think they'll get there someday, sort of.
Eventually. But so other things. So obviously test more regularly, mainly for me salinity, which is like the most basic thing everyone should be testing for, which of course that bit me from not doing it for ages. So that's one. On Black Friday sales, I actually did pick up some ICP tests, so I'm going to send off some new ones and get back on the traces and stuff, because I was doing really good till the moonshiner stuff.
I'm a trace element fan.
Yeah,
I love trace elements.
I had it completely dialed in. I ran out of a couple of things, and I just got lazy and quit doing it. So I want to get back on that and try and dial in the tank again and get it back into its.
It was a good one. Ryan and Randy just put out a video recently. It's like fix your coral growth. Anyway, pH, man. pH it's kind of been a trend lately, but doing things to bump. It started with CO2 scrubbers, but the science behind corals just slow down when you have that low pH. The carbonic acid slows them down. So that's a good resolution for anybody out there. Is you got 0.02 pH points this year.
Yep. So we will find out soon on this one. So because I'm doing the calcium reactor and calc on the big tank, I'm going to dose the lagoon tank. So we'll see how this lives up. But the Brightwell buffers for alkalinity say that like a big chunk of it is that they will buffer it up to 8.3 and help keep it
and not
there.
any higher.
Yeah, so I don't quite understand this black magic, but I plan on finding out.
I think it's a buffer.
It is, but it's a mix of a bunch of stuff. But if it will get to the magical 8.3, we'll find out. So
yeah, well, and that's the whole, I think it's like CChem's Reef Builder versus Super Buffer. I think that was the difference. Was like, you get the pH boost or you don't.
Yeah. But it's not.
But yeah, you're right. It's not just bicarbonate and carbonate.
Right? I mean, that's in there 100%, but there's a bunch of other stuff mixed in too. That's supposedly help with the buffering.
Some sort of pH fixing something. I don't know. Past carbonate and bicarbonate, man. Yeah. I don't know what a pH adjuster is made of. Acid and milk. I really don't know.
All right, Lucas, how do you feel about CO2 scrubbers and dosing calc a little while? I didn't have any alkalinity raising, but in LFS told me it was because no CO2 from running a CO2 scrubber. I am using a CO2 scrubber. My media is probably almost exhausted by now, but it definitely helps. I am doing calc.
Climb up in that attic again, buddy.
No, that's gone now. I got one. I made a Tupperware that sits on top of my skimmer cup so that it just blows through there. So it's teed into the outside, so it's like partial fresh air and partial recirculating. Like
you have a little valve to control. Like, did you have to tune it in?
Just a T.
Yeah.
It is
I think that'll work for most people. Yeah.
I think so. I don't really care to tune it in. It just.
I should do it because I do rely on my skimmer quite a bit. I don't know. I think I'm going to do something like you did with the skimmer. I have the media, but I want to do something clever with the top, like a Tupperware that sits on top of the skimmer and just sort of naturally pulls it in.
It's like $4. It was so cheap to build.
Yeah. I mean, all you need is a container that can pull air through it and drill holes top and bottom, little tubing connection. You're good to go.
Yep.
I'm going to try it because I think that's the last thing in place. I've got everything dosing now and that's sort of staying stable. So I just need to get that in place. And I think I'll gain those extra pH points for sure. Because I get it down in the basement. Now it's the heater being on now. I'm definitely feeling it now way worse than it was last summer.
So other slight splurge over last week. Ordered another Kalkwasser reactor. So I took the ice cap, the Avast one. So hopefully it's good.
A bass marine? Ooh, yeah.
So
cool.
I had the ice cap one that was on my frag tank, moved that over to the big tank. But because I had the big one, it would only fit if I took out my second chamber for the CO2 reactor. So it's working on there and it's doing its job. But now I'm like, I don't have my second chamber, which helps boost my pH a bit more from the calcium reactor.
Oh, the calcium reactor.
Yeah, calcium reactor, sorry.
Secondary chamber, yeah.
Yeah. So I ordered the Avast because it's smaller and skinnier. So I'm hoping that I can fit my second chamber and the Avast, which will in turn give me a higher pH. Hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, if you're putting Calcwaster on a tank that has a calcium reactor, I think you'll see it.
No, it does help, but the second chamber also gives you a bit of a boost, right? Because it absorbs.
Yeah, but how much of a boost? I think you're going to see better. I think your Calcwaster is going to be more effective in the realm of pH.
Yeah.
Than the raising that you're getting with that second chamber. I mean, I know it helps. But...
No, I put them both on. It's just right now I lost the second chamber to fit the current calc reactor that I had, so I bought the smaller one so that I could put the second chamber on.
So you had it before you had both as well.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah, that's my thoughts. Hopefully, I don't know. It's all these endless missions to get to that higher pH. We'll see. That
bad habit.
Yeah, that if I can get a high pH without using the CO2 media, I might go that way just because, got to replace it every couple months and it's not having as much renewable. So that's the other thing.
Another resolution is clean your dang sand beds. That's easy to neglect, man. So what I usually do is I'll stir the bed up manually with my hand and then do my water change.
Yep.
Because I don't want to go through the hassle of gravel vacuuming. Gravel vacuum's it's effective, man. If you can get it done at least once a month, I think you're going to be much better off than just not doing it at all or only doing it every 6 months. Because I think most hobbyists realistically it's going to be a 3 to 6 month thing where they do a deep clean and they're stirring and getting all that shit up.
Yeah.
And then, every 2 weeks or every week when you're doing your change, you're just siphoning out the water and putting it back in.
Yep.
But in order to keep those white sand beds, man, you have to do it. You have to gravel vac it and turn it over. Because even in clean tanks, you're going to get stuff that grows on there. And then, little sand sifting Goby to help you out.
I do want to get some more sand bed helpers to do it. I got the uglies going on in the frag tank beside me now, so it's not quite as white and pristine. You can see certain spots where snails bends all nice and white, and the rest.
I'm finally seeing the since I've started seeing coral and algae grow in the last couple months since I started dosing. I'm finally seeing that sort of gold algae, whether it's dinoflagellates or not, I don't know, but it's sort of that brown gold algae kind of just happens in a new tank. It's finally subsiding. And the cool thing is it only grows on my glass. It doesn't hit the rocks or substrate at all, but it's only on the glass. It's sort of a dark film algae or gold algae. And it's finally going away, which is cool.
That's good. Oh,
yeah.
So the other...
I don't think I got a dinoflagellate plague or anything, but it's been there since the tank is cycled and it's now finally subsiding,
That's good. So speaking of sandbag cleaning, that's also on my list for this week, next week or two. But I dumped in, because when I was adding sand, there's a couple lower spots in my tank from just getting blown around in the water box. So I dumped in some new sand, and it's blaring white to not so white beside it. I'm like, yep, this is way overdue for cleaning. So every 5 or 6 months, I think I just gotta do a chunk of the tank.
Well, you gotta do more often than that. That's what I'm saying.
Okay, fine, every 4 months. 4 months.
To keep it pristine, where your tank is looking fresh, all the time. You just have to go in there and clean the sand bed, because not only does it gunk up with detritus, but things will grow on it. It's just not going to look super clean and nice. And the difference between a tank that has a clean sand bed and one that doesn't is pretty darn impressive.
It's true. Okay.
A tank, you know what I mean? Tanks with stuff growing on the walls, obviously it looks crappy. But when you see a tank side by side with one that has a white sand bed, clean walls, and everything happy and healthy and growing, versus a tank that has great healthy coral, but dirty walls and some sand on the sand bed in the back corner.
Yep.
It's just a night and day difference, I think, with oh man, that's impressive, versus oh, that tank's really cool.
Have you ever had a cucumber?
No, I had a sea apple, just terrible, but not a cucumber.
I was talking to Thomas about this like a week ago, and I think he was saying it was the pink belly seacuber, but he says the thing was just like a machine at keeping the sandbed like perfectly pristine.
The sand sifting ones, not like not like a lettuce one, like not an algae eater, but a
Yeah,
sand
like the
sifting one,
big
right? Yeah.
blobs of
Yeah,
yeah.
no, I got you. But I think there's ones that will actually go through and eat the sand, and then there's ones
Yeah,
that
they poop it all out as pristine white sand. They literally just
right,
eat it.
exactly.
It goes through them and they clean it. But that's how they clean and sift through. So I don't know. I've debated one of those. The other thing
I
too.
think in a big tank you could get away with it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd be scared in a smaller tank it would just starve eventually. But I don't
Yeah,
know.
I think you'd want an aged tank. But
We're feeding frozen food like we do. I mean,
I don't know. So I think that like I have a goal of being able to see lots of sand again in the other tank. So I keep
yeah,
taking all my big stuff and moving it to the frag tank just to free up my sandbags. I want to get back to that white, lovely sand.
yeah, man. It's
Yep.
makes you happy when you look at the tank.
It's true.
I'm almost there downstairs. It's one corner that's just a problem. It's just a dead zone, and I mean the only way to fix it is like add a pump, and I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to keep toying with the flow and moving the power heads up and angling them until I can get something better back in that corner.
Yeah.
It's just the way the tank's designed. It's a cube, and I have everything on the back wall, so that's the way it is.
Yep. So true. How about setting up multiple tanks? That's a bad habit. Yeah, that can be addicting. It's easy to fall into that multi-tank syndrome, MTS.
And don't get ahead of yourself. It's easy to get excited about the hobby and not sort of pay attention to what you're spending and how the tank, how much the tank is affecting just how much time and how much resources the tank is taking from you to maintain.
Time
so
and
yeah,
money.
I suppose be mindful about that.
It's true.
There's a balance.
Aussie Dan, maybe off topic, but have you had any experience with dosing vitamin C? I have read about it, but I've never tried it.
I've just put it on food. I've never tried to like dose it.
Like food for you or food for the fish?
No, food for the fish.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like a food soak. Yeah, they have like vitamin C food soaks, like essentially citric acid or orange juice in a bottle.
Yeah.
Like just yellow like vitamin C. You can soak your food in it.
Good to know. What about like Cellcons and that stuff? Have you ever
I
found
like
that to be useful?
Cellcon. I've used a lot of Cellcon. I generally like to do it with like dry pellet food just because it soaks it up a little better and like I know it's getting into the fish. I kind of feel like the frozen food it just doesn't
Light coating that washes off?
Well, yeah, it just sort of exactly washes off. It doesn't really take it up. So I try to use it with the pellet food every now and again. I mean it's rich stuff, and I feel it's good for them. I mean it's fatty acids and hoofus. So yeah.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay. What other bad habits? If you have socks, not changing them off, 100%. That's very, very common.
Filter socks is a great one. No sock is better than a dirty sock. So if you're like not changing socks and you're just leaving it in there for weeks at a time, waiting till it literally overflows, just pull it out and don't run one and just try, use other methods that are easier for you to handle in terms of maintenance to maintain the tank. It's not the end of the world. Now you're going to end up with a lot more debris and probably higher nitrate and phosphate, but if there's other means that you can do to remedy that, maybe crank up the light on a refugium or just get a refugium, like that can be certainly less demanding and still have the same effect. And the particulates can be good for coral. If you have a heavily stocked coral tank, like particulates can be good for them.
Chaeto also works as a great filter sock. It catches a lot. I mean, when you clean it and move it, it's going to be like a cloud in your tank. But
yeah, for sure, it definitely can catch a lot. Or just get a filter roller. I'm telling you.
I'm a fan.
Those things are magic. You're not a fan?
No, I am a fan. I love them.
Yeah.
They're
magic, man.
If I had a small tank, I would probably go filter rollless because the particulate density in the water is likely not enough that you're going to overly notice it. But if you have a couple foot tank and you have that water depth, you're going to notice a lot more stuff in your water. And so you're going to notice the clarity, right? Like the bigger the tank, the deeper the tank, the longer the tank, the more you're going to notice that clarity. So that's why any larger tank, 100%, I would do a filter roller. In a small nano tank, I don't know if I'd bother, but in a big tank, 100%.
I can see that.
Yep.
I can see that. Yeah.
3, 2, 1 reefer. Solid advice. I need to stop messing with the tank and leave it alone. 100%. If you, the first couple years of reefing, my hands are in the tank every single day. Right? Every day. Oh, this curl's an inch out of place. Oh, a snail moved it, right? Oh, this fell over. Like, you're constantly in there. Now,
this brings up one. Go ahead.
So every time you put your hand in the tank, you know, all those oils from your skin, your freaking gallons of hand sanitizers everyone uses lately, right? All this stuff is likely getting into your water, and it's likely irritants that are the corals obviously don't favor, right? So one thing, rinse your hands off first. I usually don't use water. I usually just rinse them really well just to get any like surfacey stuff off, or I dunk my hand in the tank. Not always, but it's a good idea to do that. So yeah, keeping your hands out of the tank more, you know, maybe wait a couple days before you go in and tweak things, right? Just doing that less will add more stability to your tank. So that's another a bad habit, I guess, having your arm in there every single day.
Certainly. And the whole, like, you know, is it a bad habit to not wear gloves? I mean, certainly can be risky.
Never use one of them.
I've never used gloves either. Yeah, so, and I probably never will, but there's certainly some, you know, amount of risk to that. Because of the things on your hands. So I think the advice, just rinse your hands before you put them in the tank. Like, make a habit of that, and I think you're good. Yeah, for sure.
Yep. Need to clean my skimmer more often. I'll just cite out of mind. Yeah. So Greg, get a net cleaner.
Same with the filter socks, man. Yep. A dirty cup is not doing you any good. At that point, you might as well. It's harming you because it's taking that concentrated waste and just allowing it to dissolve back into the water. So yeah, if you're not cleaning your cup and pulling out and wiping that mud out, you know how the inside of the net gets mud, like that mud will just falls off and goes back in the water. You got to wipe that mud out and clean the entire cup. It's not enough to just let the skim it liquid out. Like, that doesn't have the same effect as cleaning the cup. You got to wipe the inside of the neck, rinse it off, and then go in the actual skimmer body. If it's caked on the top of that, you got to go in there and wipe that out.
Yep.
Because all of that is just junk that the skimmer removed. And if you don't remove it, it's not being exported, you know?
Yep. It will still work, just not as efficiently, right? Because it's harder for that bubble column to work its way up. You know, a smooth surface is easy, right? But all the gunk,
and it also kicks that shit back into the skimmer. Sure. You know what I mean? Like, as the bubbles and whatnot. Like, it'll keep building mud on top of there, but I think it's, you know, fairly proven that you're going to have more efficient export the more often you do that, you know. Yeah. You let it build up, you pull it out. You let it build up, you pull it out. As opposed to just letting it build up forever, like it's going to be a decline in terms of how much is coming out.
Exactly. Owen, could you run a filter roll off for a separate pump in the sump so you don't want to come in sump? 100% can. I have seen people do that. Video I did way back in the way of Jay's tank at Ecotech. Actually, in his office tank, he had it running off. Same thing. He still had just a looser filter sock, like a higher pore size or whatever, just for big stuff. And he had it in the next column running off his home pump just to polish the water, and his tank still looked awesome. So definitely still worked well.
Yeah, no, it's a great approach. If you don't have, you know, people always ask about, well, I'm not sure if it'll fit into my filter sock chamber, or I have a built-in sock holder, like I can't knock it out. I'm like, it's okay, as long as you have somewhere in that second chamber right next to the skimmer is fine. Yep. Yeah, you can just pump the water right through it, and it'll have the same effect. And you know, as long as you're circulating it significantly, it's still going to work.
Exactly. It's not going to get 100% of your water, but it'll get the majority of it and still make a huge impact. So I would think so. What's going on, Aaron? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Got any resolutions, reef tank resolutions? What are your goals this year?
Yeah, man. What do you guys have for goals? What are your bad habits? What are you changing? What do you need to do better on?
You're talking to me or people listening?
People listening, but you too. You can participate. Yeah. We're all one big happy family here.
Well, I want to talk about resolutions. You got any goals? We need to set goals for ourselves this year. I think I don't want to set the auto water change up. That's not my goal.
Fair.
Building a salt mixing station. That's my goal.
That's a solid goal.
Because I mean, I have everything. I mix it, but it's not like a station.
Yeah.
One bucket doesn't have one actual saltwater bucket doesn't have a float valve on it. I just have the float valve on the fresh bucket. It's a pain in the ass to fill up my ATO chamber because I don't have like a fill.
Yep.
So I'm like using a pitcher or just siphoning water with a 1/2-inch hose. and I'm using like a 5-gallon carboy, so
Mm-hmm.
kind of a pain filling it up all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, building saltwater mixing station, or just a water station in general, where I've got my ATO water, my salt water handled,
Mm-hmm.
RODI lines coming in on float valves, auto shut off valve.
Yep.
That's my 2022 goal.
Solid one. Basically, any task that you do, find a way to make it easier, more efficient, and you'll do it more often. And yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a pain in the ass. You're less likely to do it.
Yeah.
And if it's easy, less likely to neglect it.
It's true. In the comments on one of the videos the other day, someone asked me why I had an ATK pump going to my saltwater bin instead of just putting my RODI water to it. So I actually have my RODI water going to it as well. So I have a valve for it. And I added the ATK pump, the second one, in my ATO bin. So if I want to fill the saltwater bin faster, I can have the RODI filling it plus take water from the other bin. So I need to make salt, or I don't want to wait around for ages. I can have both pumps basically filling the bin so it fills up twice as fast. And then it's just quicker to get that salt mixing.
I need to come up with a clever way to fill my ATO. I just want to hard line a 1/4-inch line into it and then put a valve on it, You want
to know what I did? Super simple.
Sure.
Works well. Okay.
Sure.
So there is a float valve for backup. Never gets used, just for backup. I have the Marriage Saver, whatever the actual name is, Flood Guardian.
That's a good idea. Yeah.
That is hooked up to my RODI unit on a timer. So every 3 days, it turns it on. Now, when you power it, it opens the solenoid and will start filling. There's an optical sensor. And as soon as that optical sensor hits, it turns off the solenoid. So that's basically my auto refill. And now the timer every 3 days runs it from like 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. or whatever it takes. So 4 or 5 hours. But after 4 or 5 hours, it kills power to it. So for whatever reason, if it's something,
if it failed,
something failed, it could only run for so many hours. Now, there's also the float valve in there, so that if something else ever failed, there's also the float valve on top. So I have multiple layers there. But that's what I do, is refilling my ATO bin directly from the RODI unit with multiple levels of safety there. Now, I wanted to connect it to my other ATO bin, but I couldn't find a nice way to run it, so I just put a second RODI in and did the setup. And then my big ATO bin, my mixing station, so my calc drip and my ATO both come directly from my big 40-gallon bin. And then I just have an optical sensor in the top and bottom. And when it hits the bottom one, it turns on my RODI system, refills it, hits the top one, turns it off. Then again, also have a float valve in there. It's kind of like the backup.
I should have thought of that Marriage Saver. That's a good idea.
Yeah, super
I'll
simple,
just tee
right?
I'll tee off the RO lines and then just go right into the.
Yeah, and just put it on a timer and just let it turn on every 3 days or something.
I'm hesitant to add the RO line directly into my ATO chamber because endless supply of water. But at the same time, with the Marriage Saver and a float valve, like it's redundant enough.
Float valve for backup, and the Marriage Saver is mainly just to prevent all the TDS creep. Because if you had your RODI plumbed directly to your bin, every time it drops down, it turn on again, right? And it's harder on your DI. It will burn through it quicker. So only let it run every 3 days, lets it fill up, 5, 6, 7 gallons at a time instead of a liter at a time. So that's the main reason. It makes your DI last way longer. But yeah, the other big thing is not hauling buckets around means less chance of you spilling, which, is always a plus.
Always benefit, yeah.
Yep. New Year's resolution, get the wife on board to better understand my obsessive hobby. This is true. That never hurts. It's always a good idea. You can bring them, let them pick out a fish, name the fish.
Take them to the fish store.
Just don't.
It's how it all begins.
Just don't sell their favorite fish later. They'll be mad at you for a long time over it. I used to have a hippo tang that was a terrorist in my tank because it would pick up frags. Like, it was super cool fish, but it'd pick up frags and it'd go drop them on other corals, and my corals would die because they're like making them coral warfare, essentially, right?
Yeah.
So I eventually sold them because it was getting pretty big, but then I was in trouble for ages over that one. Yep. But no harming the corals.
Yeah, no, I feel you on that, man. There's nothing worse than corals killing each other.
Yeah.
Healthy corals in your tank killing each other is
exactly
not a great feeling.
Yeah. Because fish are like interior decorating your tank on a constant basis.
Yeah, or like one falls and just lands in the other one. I've had them just annihilate, like LPS just annihilate a frag and feel like seconds of it falling off.
Oh, I know, it's crazy, and some of them do scrap fast. If you ever watch, it's kind of crazy. Like I've seen some where you'll see like this webbing, like they're almost like coming out of the coral encrusting, attacking the next one beside it. It's pretty crazy.
Ministerial filaments, little white curlicues that come out.
Yeah, it's crazy.
They're gnarly, man. It's like digesting the flesh of the other coral.
Yeah.
It's like there's enzymes and stuff that come out and just, digest that other flesh that it's touching.
Yeah,
it's crazy to see in your tank. Like it's gnarly to see.
Yeah.
I've had corals go through it and recover too, like, recover from an attack, so to speak.
No, so true. What else is on the resolution list? I'm hopefully going to get the 2 copper bands to play nice in the one tank. A couple of people in my last video commented, said that they've done it, so that gives me much more hope. I wasn't sure if they play nice. So probably in the next week or so, I'm going to introduce the second one that's in my Zoa tank on the left to the tank on the right.
Eating clams? Are they eating anything different?
Nope. Basically all mine are eating mysis, so I have 3 copper bands now. I'm
very nice.
a copper band collector. I love them. Beautiful fish.
Oh, they're gorgeous fish, dude. Yep. They can't. God, it's hard to beat.
The one I picked him up from the LFS because he was like, "Yeah, this guy's a Aptasia machine," and he is. He is hand down, and within like a week, ate all the Aptasia off my Zoas. So the funny thing is, I did that, and then I completely forgot about it. So I have had this jar as like a Bergie experiment on my desk for like a month, and I put a bunch of Bergie eggs in here, and needless to say, they hatched. So now there's a ton of baby Bergie in here, and there's like a whole slew of them that are like ganging up on this one Aptasia and basically devoured it. But now I'm like, oh crap, I'm basically out of Aptasia now, when I used to have like seas of it.
Right.
So I gotta find a few more to add to there. So I went from having like this Aptasia problem to having next to no Aptasia. I'm like, oh no, I got these baby Bergias I gotta feed now. So
old problem to have.
Yep, exactly. Yep, so that's fun. So side experiment, Bergias are ridiculously easy to breed from what I've learned. I might set up a little.
Have the Aptasia, man.
I know, that's the hard part.
You should. They're not cheap. You can sell them. You can get money for them.
Easily could. So I'm half debating setting up a little tiny Aptasia tank for fun. You probably need a big Aptasia tank, to be honest. But
that's the thing, though. Like, I don't know how I do it. I'd probably get, like you said, have an Aptasia tank.
You'd have to.
Rubble chunks in there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Only Aptasia, no competition for anything.
Yep.
Probably feed it, keep it dirty.
Mm-hmm.
Nice bright light on it. Maybe like a white daylight or something.
Feed it, poke
and
them,
pull the rocks out. Yeah.
No, but that's bad. Don't pull the rocks out. So my original experiment trying to breed Bergias, well, someone somehow got into the Aptasia tank and like decimated them. There went all my Aptasia. But I was putting frags into the Bergia tank and they were cleaning it up. I'm like, sweet, thank you for your service. But if you get astrenosaurs or bristleworms or copepods, anything, they will eat the Bergia eggs. So if you want to breed them, you need to have the eggs in their own kind of container, their own area, away from any potential pests. So I actually sucked out a bunch of eggs from my sump before I redid the tank, and it literally threw them in this jar. I've done a few like half a cup water changes, but this jar literally has sat on my desk for like a month, and all of a sudden I have a bunch of baby Bergias in there. Like, that's how easy they were. I've done next to nothing other than a few water changes.
How many are in there?
I took actually
a bunch. What do you say, a bunch? Like 5 or like 20?
At least 20.
Oh wow.
I took this photo before my live stream a little bit. Can I pull this up somehow? I don't know if you can see that, but probably not.
Kind of, sort of.
I just posted to my Instagram story, but I can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. There's probably 20, at least 20 in that photo. And they're just like all jumping on, just like tag teaming this Aptasia. It was pretty crazy.
You need Aptasia, man, and your baby's gonna start.
Well, I got 2 in there now. I gotta hopefully find a few more and some frags to raise her off later and throw in there and keep them going for a little while. But yeah,
there you go.
Super easy. So super cool. It's a really good project for how overly priced they are and how easy they are to breed. It's definitely a cool project that if anyone has an Aptasia issue, definitely try it. New Year's resolution: no more Aptasia.
Yeah, everybody's got that one.
Except for maybe my Aptasia tank if I start it.
That's no brainer. You got any personal resolutions?
Mm,
Don't get COVID.
yeah, that's a solid one.
Yeah.
How about you?
I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I want to catch a muskie.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good one. I want to go fishing for muskie. Well, going fishing and catching one's different. Muskie are not easy fish to catch, especially down here.
Yeah. I don't even know
probably
what that
a little
is.
bit. It's like a pike. You know what a pike is, right?
Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah. So a muskie lung or a muskie is just a big pike. They're very similar fish, but the muskie are bigger.
Mm-hmm.
And they're much more finicky. So since they're so big, they only eat like once a week.
Oh, crazy.
So it's just harder to get them to. Yeah, it's just harder to get them to hit a lure. And you got to use big lures. So you got to, they call it the fish of 10,000 casts. You got to chuck a duck-sized lure 300 times before you get one to even look at it. Mm-hmm. And then at that point, you got another 300 casts before you get one to bite it.
Yeah.
And then you'll probably lose that one. So then you got another 300 casts before you get one.
Oh, crazy.
You'll be able to land one.
Yeah.
It's sort of a bucket list fish for a lot of fishermen.
That's cool.
But they're big, man. They're big.
Yep. Nice.
4 or 5 foot long.
That's good. That's good. What are my goals? I don't know. Hopefully turn this frag tank or the now shallow lagoon tank into an awesome tank, hopefully. That's on my bucket list of the year. I've added a few more chunks of stuff that I broke off accidentally out of my other tank, but I'm going to try and might trade another local reefer a bunch of frags later to add a bunch of different stuff to the tank. Try not to, I could frag a ton of stuff out of mine and do it, but I'm trying to get different things. So it's not just, different versions of the tank.
I want to get, I made a spot I want to get a bird's nest.
Yep.
Tricks or something. I got a nice little spot. It's going to look cool if it grows up. So
bird's nests are a hard coral for me, man. I don't know why they call it beginner coral. It never fares that well.
Really?
Yeah, it's weird. Bizarre.
I've grown them like basketball size, literally basketball. From a frag to a basketball, sold off the giant colony, growing them out again. But they do die. They're so densely packed, like
the middle dies off. Middle. Yeah.
Yeah, which I think happens naturally. Like I think it happens that way in the ocean with a bird's nest, just because it's so tight.
That's fair.
Like you couldn't get enough food and flow to the middle of that coral. No light.
Power head right on the edge. Surrounded with light bulbs.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know 100%, but I'm pretty sure that's the way it happens naturally.
That'll be good. Other reefer resolutions for me: test salinity, at least monthly, but shoot for weekly. Solid one. I'm actually going to attempt to do some Icp tests every few months and attempt to dial and trace elements. I started really well with that, then became a slacker. I'm gonna try and get back on that and just try to fine tune parameters and basically just don't be a slacker on them.
Do you use Triton service?
ATI actually. I find they
ATI
test a bit more, and they test your RDI and some other stuff, which I like. So
cool.
I've used Triton as well, but I like
ATI
a little bit
I've
better.
used Triton the most. I've actually sent off all 3 of them. The ICP analysis, ATI, and Triton, but I've used Triton the most for my own tanks.
Yep. Did you find much of a difference in them all, or pretty much all similar?
I did a video on this a while back. It was years ago now, but yeah, there's just the difference between what they test for. At the end of the day, I think the level of accuracy you get is all about, the tech running the machine and calibrating the dang thing. So I think there's room for error no matter what service you go with. But I couldn't tell you 100% which one I think is a better option or best option. All we have to go on is what they test for, and you've discovered the one that tests for the most stuff. I will say Triton has the most extensive service that comes with it. So you get the explanation of what it is, you get the suggestions of how to fix it and what to do, and then even products to help you out. So
that's fair.
That's certainly a step above either of the other 2 companies. And they've been doing it the longest too. So I've got some confidence in that.
Yep. Oh, that's fair.
Yeah.
The other slightly skewed thing is because I was dosing the Reef Moonshiner trace elements, a mixture of those and the Brightwell ones. They had a calculator tool that would directly play nice with the ATI one. So it just calculate all the dosages for you. So that's another reason I kind of lean more towards that one, just because it made life so much easier.
Trace elements?
Yeah. Just because they're their tool, they're basically a spreadsheet that they made works nicely with that one. So that's one reason I did that one. But so makes life easier. And I like that tested RDI.
So what trace elements are you dialing?
All of them.
All of them,
Yes.
all the ones they test for.
Yep.
Yeah.
We could do a whole stream just on trace elements easily. We'll do this another week. Yep.
That would be a conversation.
I know. Lewis, do you know what testing service Chris from ACI raised about? I do not, but I know there's somebody local to him with a ICP machine, so I know he has some local source hookup to do it. I don't know who it is though, but I will ask him about it next time I talk to him. Who's actually one that I should have on the stream? Chris from ACI.
Aquaculture.
Yeah.
ACI.
He's always a good fountain of knowledge.
Yeah, man, that guy's great.
Mm-hmm.
Great personality. Super cool.
Yeah. You good? All right, buddy. I think it was a good one.
Indeed.
Yeah. Hopefully you guys enjoyed today's Reefer Resolutions. If you have any of your own, let me know in the comments later. If you enjoyed it, hit that thumbs up, like button. Robert, always appreciated coming on, man.
Adios, Devin. Happy New Year, everybody.
All right,
Thanks
guys.
for watching. We'll see you in 4 weeks.